Hello, everyone. So, next step in the top construction, we have our top here and a work board to help hold it, all glued up. And the next decision that we have to make is what shape to make it. We call that the model. The model describes the way the curves work on the top, the way things, changing shapes are resolved and blend and flow into each other. And it's what we have to decide before we get our tools together and start cutting. Let's think about how this works. So here's the guitar, and the top is something like that. We have this dimension, which we're going to call loft or height. We have this curve, which we can call a dome. And we have this thickness, which we'll call the edge thickness. And then we have a place where the dome stops curving in this direction and starts to straighten out and curve in the other direction. And where that happens is the recurve. And this is really an important part of how an archtop top works. We're going to have a quick look at some of these guitars on the bench. And I've got a piece of cardboard here so we don't scratch anything up. And so this is just basically straight edges, working as a straight edge. And so we can see that here's the dome. And then if you can see over here, this is a pretty flat part right there. And then as soon as we start to see light underneath like that, this is where the recurve is right here. That's where the recurve starts. Okay? And if we keep going, of course there's a hollow around the edge. And this isn't on every guitar, but it's quite common. Okay? So this place where the dome stops being a dome starts to straighten out a little bit and then turns the other way, the recurve, a very important transitional space. And let's talk a little bit why that is. So it's really analogous to a speaker where you have the center of the speaker or the top being driven by the energy from the strings through the bridge. So we've got a load on the top, strings are pushing down, and whatever benefit or sound we're going to get because of the action of the strings distorting the top, and the top then distorting the air and making sound waves. So we don't have much energy to work with. As we've talked before, we don't have a bow the way a violin player has a bow. We only have one little input, and we depend on the efficiency of the guitar for whatever happens after we strike that note. So the dome is our friend because it's going to resist deformation and keep the top in good shape. And as we mentioned, the dome shape puts all the load, whatever load comes down on the top, is shared by this material, and it's all in compression because of the convexity of this domed surface. Then, when we get to the recurve area, around here, this strong dome shape starts to get weakened by this shape change where the recurve is. So again, there's kind of a flat spot, and there you can see the light underneath, and sure enough, there's a curve that's in the opposite direction than this curve. So convex curve, concave. In this transition and in the concavity around the edge, you can think of this as the surround of a speaker. That's the flexible part outside of the speaker cone, say, to continue with this. And that part is going to allow the domed part of the top to rotate and move and wiggle around and hopefully make a lot of sound. If we don't have a recurve, then the domed shape has to come all the way out to the edge of the guitar, and it makes a very, very strong top. Some instruments have always been made this way. There's a school of violin making from Brescia in northern Italy, and it's a famous and well-regarded school of design in violin making. And the Brescian instruments do not have recurve, so it's not a necessity. But today, I don't think anybody really builds those instruments because the recurve has shown over time to produce a better result. And I think for the Archtop, we can have a look at the X-rays that I was given by John Thomas. Where you can see that Orville Gibson's top curves in a dome, and then the dome accelerates towards the edge. So there isn't any kind of recurve or surround behavior in his model. Let's talk about the center of the model a little bit. Some people like to make an apex, a kind of a point down the center of the guitar. So this material here would come up a little bit higher, and it makes a stronger shape. I think that's probably not a good idea. I think that the center of the top should be maybe a little flatter than the rest of this dome. So maybe the dome would be the most curved from here to here, and then a little bit flatter in the center. I think it's better for response if the top is a little bit weaker and a little bit more flexible in the center. And as we've gone over, the dome shape for any given thickness is a stiffer shape than a flat shape. So let's have a quick look at this spectacular D'Acquisto guitar from 1976, and we'll use this piece of cardboard here to have a look. Here's our dome surface, and then there we have a little bit of a flat place, and as we continue out, still a little bit flat. Then there's the light showing the concavity, and then here at the edge we see there's a substantial concavity with the plastic binding being quite a bit higher than the wood adjacent to it. Okay, and this guitar has an interesting thing going on here where this kind of looks the way you would expect on this side. And if we look at this, but then look at this disparity here. Isn't that interesting? Got a little bit higher here than it is here. So the carving has a discontinuity to it. And when we look at the other side of the guitar, we see that that's not happening. So whether this was something that Jimmy did intentionally or something that happened over the years in response to the string tension, we can't be sure. At any rate, I think this guitar is a lovely example of a really, really beautiful model. Now let's try and get some dimensions from this so we can get some kind of starting place for our own work. Here's a piece of cardboard that I've cut to a 25-inch arc, and we can see that that's a lot more curved than the guitar is here. Here's a 30-inch arc, still more curved. But when we take a longer 30-inch arc and we put it underneath here, we see that it's kind of representing the general idea of what's going on here. So there's a 30-inch arc right in back of the bridge, looking like it's fitting fairly well. Again, it's a little hard to tell what Jimmy did and what time has done. But now if we look at the back, we see that similarly we have something like a 30-inch arc, or what is it, just under 100 millimeters. All right. And then we can look at it some other places. We see it's much more curved here. More like 25-inch arc here. Okay. And we'll look at the back too for the recurve. We see there's our flat spot right there. Not flat spot, but flat area, the beginning of the transition. And then the corner picks up over here. A little light underneath the cardboard. And then, of course, a big hollow, just like the top, a big hollow around the edge. So, to me, I think it's pretty clear that the way the recurve works to create a surround for the top to do some large movements, which are in support of the low range of the guitar. The way that works is primarily due to this part of the top near the edge, not so much the last little bit of it. Now, the last little bit, the last, say, whatever it is, 20 millimeters or 3/4 of an inch around the edge, some builders like to do a very deeply sculpted kind of dish or a trench around the edge of the guitar, and it's thought to be attractive. I don't have any quarrel with it, but when we're out here, we have to be realistic and say we have the thickness of the side, and then we also have the thickness of the lining, whatever that is, and we're pretty sure that the top isn't going to be doing any kind of independent vibration over the lining or the side where it's glued there. So any specific detail way out at the perimeter is unlikely to have an effect on the sound of the guitar. Whereas right next to that, this recurvy area adjacent to the edge of the guitar is very important, particularly in low-end response. So moving on to a guitar that I built maybe 10 years ago. We'll try this 25-inch radius arc here. You see my guitar is a little bit lower than that. So 30. Well, it's a little tricky to measure with just one arc because there's so much going on, the multitude of shapes. So this is sort of kind of 30-ish, so not so unlike the DeQuisto, I guess, in the area of the bridge. Yeah, so it's about 30. So maybe we could say that that's some kind of place to start if you were going to start making a template for your own arching. Now, some people buy templates that are ready-made by designs by other builders, and I don't have any problem with that. I've never done that, but it's perfectly okay to do it, particularly when you're starting. It gives you a place to start from, and at least you have some data if you follow those patterns of what you've done, and maybe you can come to some conclusions. Although, I will say that there are so many things that are important to the shaping of a top or back, to the sound of the plate, that it's tough. It's really tough to figure out which decision you've made is affecting what aspect of the sound or response of the guitar. As we've said, guitar making represents a very long equation with lots and lots of elements in it, and it's very difficult to know exactly the effect of any one element on what you do. So, having talked a little bit about modeling, we'll just touch briefly on graduation, which is the variation of thickness in the guitar. Most guitars, Archtop guitars, are somewhat thicker in the center than they are in the recurve area. I've measured this guitar with a Hacklinger gauge, which I'll explain and demonstrate later on sometime. And Jimmy's guitar is around 2.5 millimeters thick here in the recurve area, which is about 100 thousandths or 1/10 of an inch. And then in the center of the guitar, it's more like 4 millimeters or 160 thousandths thick, say. So quite a variation, really. 1/16 of an inch or 1.5 millimeters thicker in the center than it is here. That seems to be pretty traditional for the way most of us proportion the thickness or graduation, as we call it, of the thickness of the top. And on this guitar, the periphery is just over 2 millimeters or 80 thousandths, and in the center is just over 3 millimeters, about 1/8 of an inch. So it's a little bit lighter than Jimmy's guitar from 1976. And I know some of you might be sick of me saying this, but it's such an important thing to remember that the stiffness of a piece of material varies with the cube of its thickness. In other words, very, very small differences in thickness make very considerable differences in stiffness. So again, it's my contention that in order to make a vibrant and powerful guitar, you need to make a guitar that's thin and that's flexible. And I'm going to show you how to do that. And that's kind of the whole point of this thing, is to try and figure out how to make a top, particularly a top, although the back is influential as well, but a top that can be energized and driven by the small amount of energy that we have available to us as guitar players. And lastly, while we're talking about building instruments, I thought I would introduce to you my first Archtop guitar finished it in 1975, and someday I'll do a critique on this guitar as if it were brought to me as a mature builder by a young builder, the way it was by me to Jimmy D'Acquisto in 1975. And I have no loss of criticism and complaint about this guitar, but still, somehow I managed to put this together, and I don't exactly remember how, so long ago. But it's pretty good guitar. I got some real praise for it, and it enabled me to continue on my journey as a builder. So why don't we have a quick look at this one? See if I knew anything back then. So here's our dome, and there's our flat spot in there. And so recurve. Well, pretty typical, actually. Looks pretty normal. No surprise, because I was staring at Gibson's. and this is, pretty typical kind of construction proportion for the model. As we build our top together, this top that we're going to continue to work on and shape up for the blue guitar, I'm going to show you how I think about it, and I'm going to come at it from the point of view of, well, I can't help it. I'm me at coming up on 70 years old, so it's me and my perspective, my experience. But I'm going to try and do it from the point of view of 23-year-old me trying to figure out which end was up and how you do something when you start out with 2 chisels, 2 planes, 2 pieces of wood, and $2. So we'll try and start from a simple place and demonstrate the building of a top, and it's going to be fun.